Most ball, protect yourself for a long time. Touch go.
Well, we're having our first look at what is to be Joseph Parker's very next opponent and what is his first fight of 2020, having fought only once in 2019. He's going to be matched against a very unheralded guy in Shondell Winters. And this is nothing against Shondell and what his aspirations are as a boxer, but the facts are the facts that this is a guy who has never fought on the world level. There are no notariable names on his resume.
There ain't.
He has a professional record of 13 wins, 2 losses, and this man is 39 years old. Whereas Joseph Parker is a very spry, very fresh, 28 years old. I mean, I don't even think most people realize that Joseph Parker, not even in his 30s yet, this guy. So you know. We only saw Joseph Parker once the whole of last year in that Alex Lapai fight. A very old, although very game, Alex Lapai.
Could take a punch.
I'd have to say that Shondell Winters is actually a step down from Alex Lapai, if you can believe that. Yes, he's a step down. I mean, same age bracket as Alex Lapai, although lacking the world-level experiences of an Alex Lapai, because at least with Alex, you can say that Alex has been in there with the likes of a Kevin Johnson, Emmanuel Char, a Vladimir Klitschko, a Malik Scott. He didn't beat any of those guys, but he was in there with him, so he has those experiences to draw from, whereas when it comes to Shondell, he doesn't even have that. I want to say that, you know, this undercard, because this is the undercard for the Mikey Garcia versus Jesse Vargas fight. You know, Parker's going to be fighting on the undercard. And I want to say that as far as undercards go, there are still 1 or 2 intriguing elements to it. That, you know, Maurice Gassiev, he's finally going to be making his heavyweight debut. And there's a lot of intrigue associated with that to see how does this guy transition. Can he be the guy at heavyweight that he was at cruiserweight? So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And of course, the fight between the WBA champion Cal Yafai against the former pound-for-pound numero uno, Chocolatito. And that in and of itself, you know, sells the undercard for me. That's a great addition to the undercard. It's almost more intriguing than the main event.
Yeah.
I think some people would argue that it is more intriguing than the main event. Better still, as far as undercards go, I still like this undercard. I'm just making my assessment of what Joseph Parker is going to be facing, and what I see is that this really isn't a step up from Alex Lapai. It really is a step down. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
This is very much a keep busy fight, a tune-up fight of sorts. Joseph hasn't been out of action a full year, you understand. It's been about 7 or 8 months since his last fight. It just feels like it's been longer because we only saw the guy in action once the whole of last year. That's why it feels like he's been away from the ring a lot longer than he actually has. It really only actually has been about 7 or 8 months. But the fact that all he did the whole of 2019 was fight Alex Lapai, and then you kick off this year fighting this guy, and you're the guys who think you're going to A-side Alexander Usyk. Is that right? I didn't forget what David Higgins said, you know, that they felt they were the A-side. Not fighting these guys, they ain't.
No, that's right.
And I know that Usyk's last opponent was almost as unheralded as Joseph's, but Usyk's got an excuse, you know, that he was making his heavyweight debut. No one expected him to square off against the Killer his very first fight at the weight, unless we forget. Usyk did unify an entire weight class. in hostile territory, on the road, I might add. So, let's not discount that just because he fought Chaz Witherspoon in his last fight. Usyk's excuse for fighting a guy like that is, hey, it's my first fight at the weight. Whereas Joseph's a former champion, former WBO champion. You'll excuse me for saying so, that, yeah, I do expect a little better, at least someone better than this guy, But, it is what it is. This is who he's going to be fighting. And if, I'm going to be honest, okay? If Joseph doesn't get this guy out of there, and I mean really get him out of there, in spectacular fashion, if he can't get this guy out of there and wrap this thing up, if he's waltzing with the guy and the fight's taking longer than it should to end, Joseph is going to have some serious problems because the heavyweight division is fast filling up with killers. Killers the likes of a Hrgovic, a Yoka, a Dubois, a Joyce. This is the next wave, the next generation of guys that are going to be running things. And if Joseph is struggling to put away a guy like Shondell Winters, I shudder to think what might happen to him at the hands of one of those young up-and-comers, those young killers looking to make names for themselves. Joseph has got to remind people, who he is. He's got to do that. There was a time when Joseph Parker was a more aggressive guy, showed good offense, showed a good body attack. It's been a long time since we've seen that Joseph Parker, and he needs to make a reappearance, a reemergence. He really does. To breathe a second wind into his career, to breathe new life into it, at minimum, you need to be able to clean this guy's clock. A guy like this, you got to be able to dispatch this guy and do it in good fashion. Because if you don't, I just don't know. I don't know. Because, let me tell you something, all right? Jerry Forrest, the guy that Murat Gassiev is going to be fighting on this same card, right? Jerry Forrest is actually a better opponent option than the guy that Parker's about to fight. Yeah, he's a better opponent. He's got a better record than Shondell Winters. Jerry Forrest has a pro record of 26 wins, 20 knockouts with 3 losses. He's actually been in there with Michael Hunter. He lost to him, but he was in there with him. He's actually been in there with Gerald Washington and lost to him too, but better still, he's been in there with him. He also lost one to Jermaine Franklin, but remember, we're comparing opponent options here, and I'd have to say that comparatively, Jerry Forrest, at 31 years old, looks a lot more formidable with a better record than Shondell Winters at 39 years old and most no world level experience at all. How is it that Murat Gassiev, a cruiserweight moving up in weight, is fighting a more formidable guy than a former heavyweight champion? Parker's got to step it up, man. It's 2020. Jerry Forrest, he's got 20 knockouts, and I would have sooner expected that Parker would be the one fighting the likes of a Jerry Forrest, and it would be Murat Gassiev, who's been out of the ring for well over a year. Okay? I would have expected that it would have been Murat fighting the likes of a Shondell Winters, that you got to take your foot off the gas a bit because it's been a long time since you threw a punch, since you took a punch. You're going to be fighting as a heavyweight. Now, that Murat Gassiev hasn't had a fight since he lost to Alexander Usyk. That was in July of 2018, okay? We're here in 2020 now. Murat sat out the whole of 2019. This is going to be his first fight in well over a year. He's fighting a guy with 20 knockouts, and then what's Joseph Parker doing? He's fighting some guy that's never fought any world-level opponents or anyone who went on to be a world-level opponent at all. So,
something's got to give.
And don't tell me I'm blowing things out of proportion. Don't tell me I'm making too much of this. The guy that Murat Gassiev is about to fight. Murat Gassiev, whose last fight was at cruiserweight well over a year ago. This guy, 26 wins, 20 of them by way of knockout. A southpaw, 31 years old. Yes, this is a more formidable guy than the guy that Joseph Parker's about to fight. The guy that Joseph Parker's about to fight is 39 years old, never fought nobody. You expect better of Parker. You expect a former heavyweight champion to find someone more formidable to fight than the likes of this guy. And inactivity's no excuse because Murat's been out of action longer than Joseph. So Joseph and Kevin Barry, they need to step it up, okay? They really do. In junior welterweight news, former WBO champion Maurice Hooker had this to say. He says, "I would win every round against Josh Taylor." He was quoted as saying, "I would outbox him. I think I would win every round against him. He's a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but I'm not Regis. I'm not that small guy. I'm bigger than him, I'm longer than him, I've got punching power, and I just outbox him." In reference to Taylor's fight with Regis Prograis, Hooker says that was a good fight. Taylor won, but not by that much, you know? Probably by a round or two. It could have even been a draw. I just felt like Taylor was the bigger guy. He started using his size close to the end of the fight. He went on to say, I would bully him in the ring, just like he did Regis. The 30-year-old Hooker gladly would make a transatlantic trip to challenge Taylor in Scotland or England. He says, I'm okay with that. My bags is packed. Just tell me and my team what date. Unbeknownst to most, Mighty Mo is actually coming off a win. No, this wasn't a win at the 140-pound limit. It was actually just above junior welterweight. He's saying some big things here, some real big talk. That he would bully Josh Taylor? I mean, I like his energy, I like his confidence, I like that he's believing in himself and he is on the rebound, but I wouldn't necessarily agree that that's how that fight would go. Nah. It is true that Maurice Hooker has more generous dimensions than a Regis Prograis, that he's a statuesque junior welterweight in all the ways that Josh Taylor is a statuesque junior welterweight. But anybody familiar with Mighty Mo knows that he doesn't actually use that height, that more often than not, he'll sacrifice his height to fight deep in the pocket and trade hooks. And that's more or less right up Josh Taylor's alley because that's what he likes to do. Mighty Mo would essentially be playing right into Josh Taylor's hands if he so decided to fight him mid-range to inside, and in all likelihood, that's what Mighty Mo would do. That's what he did with Jose Ramirez, and he paid for it. I think that against Josh Taylor, it could more or less be the same thing. Understand that the fight itself is actually an intriguing fight. I mean, I think it would yield a fan-friendly aesthetic because both Josh and Maurice, they're punchers. You know, they're both hookers. They're both mid-range to inside guys. So in that way, yes, it would be a fan-friendly fight. But I'm not even convinced that Maurice Hooker can make 140 pounds comfortably. Not anymore. I mean, look at his last fight. It wasn't at 140, was it? No.
Nope.
It was at just above 140. So if Maurice Hooker decides to drop back down to 140, make the weight, I'm not sure he can make it comfortably, and if he does make it, I'm not sure that his punch resistance and his physical condition will be there for him. I'm not convinced. I think it could be a barn burner. I think it could be a real gutting and gritty fight because both guys like to do their work mid-range to inside, but the logical choice in that situation really would be Josh Taylor. Now, there was some talk in the article of Maurice Hooker and his people trying to secure a fight with Regis Prograis. Regis Prograis, who just so happens to be a Lou DiBella entertainment fighter. Lou DiBella, who just so happens to be on the out with the people over there at the PBC. So, I mean, that does kind of limit Regis's pool of options, so long as he's a Lou DiBella entertainment fighter, because we know Lou has been exiled from PBC Island. So, Regis's best bet to get back in the mix of things is to continue to campaign as a junior welterweight as opposed to a welterweight. And a fight with Mighty Mo Hooker, I think it would yield a pleasing aesthetic the same way a Josh Taylor fight would yield a pleasing aesthetic. The Josh Taylor stuff only comes into play if Maurice can't secure a fight with Regis, that if he can't get Regis, he'll look to make a fight with Josh. I don't know how that's going to work out for Maurice because Josh has two mandatories. One that he's about to satisfy in Apinun Konsong, and after that, it's Jack Catterall. So Mighty Mo's best bet at getting back in the mix really would be with Regis Prograis, and that's a good fight. That is a good fight, because like with Josh, Regis is a mid-range to inside puncher. That's where he likes to do the business. I will say that at first glance, Regis appears to be a more durable fighter than Maurice Hooker. That if something lands clean on Regis, he's got the kind of durability to weather the shot. Whereas Maurice, given what I mentioned before, that I'm not completely sold he can make 140 comfortably, and if he can't, his punch resistance will be compromised. I kind of lean towards Regis in what could be Prograis versus Hooker. I kind of lean towards Regis Prograis. It's a great fight. The fight makes sense for both of those guys. They want to get back in the mix of things. Neither one of the two would have much luck in the welterweight division because we all know that many of the fighters in the welterweight division are PBC fighters, and PBC fighters are only trying to fight other PBC fighters, whereas, Hooker's a matchroom guy, and Regis is a DiBella entertainment guy. So their best bet of being involved in something nice, something that'll get people's attention, really would be a fight with each other. at 140. Of course, if they get it in their head that they want to start campaigning as welterweights, they may find themselves in a similar situation to Terrence Crawford, to where the vast majority of welterweights in the division are freezing them out and ignoring them. A move up to welterweight right now would not be a good move for either Maurice Hooker or Regis Prograis. Their best bet at getting in fights, interesting fights, would be to stay at 140 and see about fighting each other. Now, just back to what could be the matchup between them, the fight between Regis and Josh. Regis took some hard shots in that fight, and he gave some, but it's his durability that's important, that, when you're fighting deep in the pocket, there's something that's going to get through. It always will. It's a boxing match. So I could see Maurice Hooker landing something hard, but I'd wager that Regis Prograis takes a better punch and gives a better punch than Maurice Hooker does. So I do lean towards Regis Prograis for that fight, if they make that fight. As far as what should Maurice Hooker do if he can't get a Regis Prograis fight, well, I don't really think that Josh Taylor's an option anyway, because of what I mentioned before, that, Josh has got 2 mandatories, and he can't skip them to give Maurice Hooker a title shot. But more importantly, after this Apinun Konsung fight, it's possible that Josh Taylor decides to unify with Jose Ramirez. Thereafter, it could happen that way too. Or it could work out to where Josh satisfies both his mandatories in Konsung and Catterall, and then decides to unify with Jose Ramirez. I mean, essentially what I'm getting at is, Josh Taylor's all booked up. He very well could be. One name that Maurice Hooker could look at to be involved in a fun fight that people might want to see is the name of Ivan Berenchik, the former IBF champion. Another name would be Kirill Rillik, the former WBA champion. Those are some interesting situations for Maurice Hooker. Those are some interesting fights that could get him back in the mix of everything. Josh might be booked up for the next few months, maybe even a year. Those are the facts. The only way I could see Maurice Hooker actually getting a Josh Taylor fight at some point is if Maurice Hooker challenged Jack Catterall for mandatory status via the WBO. But all things considered, if you're Jack Catterall and you're on his team, you're not going to want to take a fight with Maurice Hooker. Why would you do that when you're already in line for a title shot that could win you 2 world titles, But that's, that is one way that Maurice could go about it. That is one way. Maurice is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I'm not sold that he can continue to make 140 pounds comfortably, but if he went up to welterweight, he'd just end up getting frozen out. So it looks like his best bet to be involved in interesting situations, interesting fights, would be to continue to campaign as a 140-pound fighter. It's just that, like I said, I'm not sure that he can really make that weight comfortably. A lot of particulars there, a lot to think about, but, hey, we'll see what happens.